Okay, thank you, Kelly. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Cabinet. I believe everyone here is aware of the fire drill, including our friends from the press. You know by now which way to go. So I don't intend on reading it out verbatim, but long and short of it is, please exit through one of the side doors, down the stairs and opposite the old bank, please. And if you do have a mobile phone, please set it to vibrate or silent. Before we begin, I have been informed today that there has been some sad news that former Mayoress Oriel Jakes has passed away on the 23rd of October. For those who don't know, she was the Mayoress during Don Jakes' mayoral year in 1995 to 1996. And I'm sure we would all, as a council, pass on our condolences to former Councillor Jakes for his loss. She was a stalwart ally of his, wife and friend and mentor, and served him throughout his long distinguished career in public service, and I'm sure we all send him our best wishes. So can we just have a moment's silence, please? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. That moves us on to agenda item number 2, which is apologies. All the Cabinet are present. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations other than those which are already printed on the agenda? Councillor Golby.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my employment has changed and needs to be updated, but it's fine.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Golby. That moves us on to agenda item 4, which is minutes of the last meeting. They have been circulated. Is everyone happy that I sign them off as a true and accurate record? Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 5 is public consultation. I have been informed that Mrs Condacall wishes to speak on items 6, 7, 11 and 12. Good, I've seen nods, so I got that right. I will intend to take them in the order that they are printed in the agenda. So that moves us on to agenda item number 6, which is the Air Quality Action Plan, and that is Councillor Gutteridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Air Quality Action Plan consultation. Cabinet is asked to consider approval of a statutory public consultation in accordance with the Environmental Act 1995 of the Council's draft Air Quality Action Plan, which has been developed following a review of the existing action plan. The Environmental Act 1995 requires local authorities through the local air quality management system to assess air quality in their area and designate air quality management areas if improvements are necessary. The Council has declared 2 AQMAs for exceedance of the annual mean nitrogen dioxide objective. These are the Leicester Road Gyratory and the Midland Road Central Avenue Corporation Street, where an AGMA is designated. Local authorities are required to produce an air quality action plan describing their pollution reduction measures it will put in place. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council previous action plan has been in place since 2011 and has now been reviewed as required by the legislation. The review was undertaken in conjunction with the Council's air quality consultant, officers from the Environmental Health, planning officers, and Warwickshire's County Council Highways team. The draft action plan produced was considered by Housing, Environment and Health Overview and Scrutiny Panel on the 24th of June 2021 and subsequently on the 7th of October 2021, where a presentation was provided by Warwickshire County Highways on the traffic components of the Transforming Nuneaton programme. The key points from the proposed action plan are AQM1, Leicester Road Gyrotary, could be revoked on the basis of compliance with the air quality objective. Exceedance of the nitrogen dioxide objective remain at 2 locations on Midland Road, AQM2. Improvements in the vehicle fleet based on national trend data suggested that Midland Road exceedance would be compliant in 2021. However, Midland Road nitrogen dioxide is not decreasing as quickly as the national trend, indicating that compliance is unlikely to be achieved within the time period. It is anticipated that the compliance will be achieved in the next few years as less polluting vehicles increase within the fleet. The action plan, in order to be proportionate, needs to focus on actions that can be implemented within the next few years with costs that are proportionate to the level of exceedance. The draft action plan sets out measures within the following 5 broad categories: support and collaboration with Warwickshire County Council on traffic management measures directly impacting on Midland Road, promotion of behaviour change away from single occupancy private vehicle use, promotion of the use of alternative fuelled vehicles, developing policies to support better air quality and controlling domestic emissions. Subject to Cabinet's decision, it is proposed that the consultation be held in connection with the draft action plan presented in the report. The question of retaining AQM1 will form part of the consultation. The statutory consultation set out by the Environment Act 1995 requires the following consultees to be consulted: DEFRA, Environment Agency, Highways England, all neighbouring local authorities, Warwickshire County Council, other public authorities as appropriate, bodies representing local businesses, interests and other organisations as appropriate. The Council will also consult with residents, businesses and other stakeholders by placing the action plan on the NBBC website and using all other NBBC communication platforms to promote the consultation. The consultation will be held for 6 weeks, after which responses will be analysed and the report to Cabinet for consideration. I would also like to thank officers for the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guttridge. I take it then that you're moving the recommendation as printed. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Smith.
Yes, Chair, happy to second that.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Condacourt.
Thank you. We absolutely do need a good air quality action plan. I know this is only about consulting on it, but I'm rather concerned with some of the things that I've read in it. Very disappointing that so much reliance is being put on vehicles becoming less polluting rather than actually reducing the number of vehicles. And a lot of the things are very vague, sort of nebulous things that are really hard to actually measure, and they were in the previous plan, which has been going for the last 10 years and were never really achieved. So those are some of my concerns. But there were some statements and things, you know, about air quality having improved. And, maybe in some areas, but, on recent reports and things, the areas like Bayton Road area and the junction, by Tesco's, Aldi and what have you in Bedworth, have definitely, not been improving. There was also references to things which I just didn't know. I mean, on page 41, I think it was, reference to the draft Nuneaton Town Centre Transport Strategy, which apparently has been developed. Please, can someone point me where I can find that? Because I've never heard any mention of it at either council. No one from Transport Planners at Warwickshire County Council mentioned it to Cycle Forum. So it's news to me. Also, the fact that transforming the Nuneaton programme includes creating new and improved heavy rail links to enhance connectivity in the north-south corridor. Again, haven't found anything about that either. On page 35, very concerned that it seemed to call the sort of limit an objective. It's not a target we're trying to reach. It's a target we want to be miles and miles from. We want to be at 0 as our objective. So I think that definitely should be changed before it gets to consultation, particularly as the World Health Organization actually want to have been suggesting that the legal limits should actually be halved. So we want to be miles away from that limit. It's definitely not an objective. And like on page 54, about holding traffic back on Tuttle Hill, where the very few receptors are further from the carriageway. Well, just wow. I mean, you're just trying to magic it away by not recording it, by having the receptors further away from the carriageway. It doesn't stop there being pollution from the traffic. So there's some serious things. And if this goes to consultation in its current form, you will be getting a very big response from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Conticle. Any points of clarification? No. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Watkins and Councillor Conticle.
Thank you. Are we keeping these on, taking them off? What's the protocol? Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say before I kick off on tonight's agenda that I do have a lot to say on tonight's agenda, but I thought I'd come so that my name isn't bandied around all social media again tonight saying I couldn't be bothered. So now I'll go on to the things that I'm talking about on tonight's agenda. The air quality. It's good to see that there's some consultation going out, and I applaud that. What I would like to ask Cabinet to do tonight is to help me in getting Warwickshire County Council to listen to some of the things that we've been putting forward, well, I've been putting forward for many years now, which is the Northern Relief Road. I know that yourself and Councillor Golby have seen it on the Transforming Nuneaton. But I have had some copies done for other Cabinet members if you need them. Kelly, could you give them later? This is a report that was done some years ago, and it shows that if a Northern Relief Road was done, it would take something like 35% of the traffic out of Nuneaton Town Centre. We are the largest town in Warwickshire. It is about time Warwickshire started listening to us. We have got 2 air quality problems within Nuneaton Town Centre. The main problem with the Nuneaton Town Centre is you have to drive into the town centre to drive back out of it. By putting a Northern Relief Road in, which would be somewhere near the Judkins Quarry entrance and ending up on Weddington Road, you would no longer have to drive into the town to drive out of the town. You would tackle and take out of the air quality problems on Midland Road and the Leicester gyratory system. You would tackle the problem of the Asda traffic at the Asda Island, and you would also tackle the problem of the Inkley traffic, so where people are having to drive into the town centre to drive over one of the 2 bridges we have in Nuneaton. So that's what I'm here today to ask Cabinet to do. Is you are the ruling group, and you are the ruling group at county, so I would ask you to lobby the county officers there to take this more seriously, because they obviously haven't taken it seriously over the years that I have been trying to get them to take it. And it would also, I've seen the response tonight only briefly before I came out, and I'm talking about 10 minutes before I came out. Everything that was put in that response did not tackle any of the answers that I asked. It went on about Bermuda Connectivity Bridge and all sorts of things, but it did not tackle what I asked. I also said that if the money was spent on the Northern Relief Road, some of the road system improvements that county say they're going to do might not have to be done, or might not have to spend so much money on them. I also noticed in the like I say, it was only very briefly, in the reply that I've had tonight, that it said something about the amount of houses being built somewhere else, and we've not had enough houses or something. The response needs to be looked at, and so that is why I'm here tonight, is asking Cabinet for their support in helping me lobby them to listen to the biggest town in Warwickshire and to tackle the two air quality issues that we have by not allowing the traffic to go into the town, to drive out of the town. I find it bizarre, really, that county won't listen to us when we've came up with the answer, we've came up with a solution to the air quality issues. The facts are we die earlier in this borough of obesity, heart disease, cancer, things like that. Probably some of them are linked to air quality issues that we have, and there's a solution here, Chair, and I'm just asking for you to add that on to this consultation, if you could, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Condicle.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we're strongly opposed to a Northern Road, and it will never happen, because the one that happened in Rugby almost bankrupted the highways budget crossing the West Coast Main Line. It is not something that you can do cheaply, and I would guess a thing going across Wellington Fields would be a £100 million project, and I cannot see that happening in this post-COP climate change environment. What we really do need to improve the air quality is to actually divert as much traffic away from the roads by actually getting people to use public transport. And we've got a very good scheme at Stocking Ford potentially to reopen the railway station. We can reopen the Wellington side of Nuneaton railway station, and hopefully one day we'll get more trains from Nuneaton to Coventry when they eventually build that bay platform. So the way forward is to actually get a greener Nuneaton, and a lot of the air quality problems are very much down to people being forced to drive because there is no viable alternative. At the moment, there's only one train an hour that stops at Hinckley, one train an hour that goes to Coventry, and those two trains do not meet. So people go from Hinckley to Coventry, come through Nuneaton Town Centre. In terms of the air quality report itself, if you look at the graphs, particularly the ones about the Midland Road, I think your page numbers are quite small, 36 and later, yeah. The graphs are totally flat. We said 11 years ago, 10 years ago, cars would get greener, the graphs would get better. The graphs have not moved in the last decade. Midland Road, Eton Gyratory are flatlining at no improvement. And that is because of the increased traffic we get, and we're not a rich town. We get the hand-me-down cars, people buying second and third-hand cars. We get the lorries going up to the quarries and now the landfill sites and restoration sites up Tuttle Hill. There is so much heavy traffic, and this is also why EVs, electric cars, do nothing to improve air quality if the traffic is jammed up and the lorries are stuck in the traffic, because it's not the greenest cars that make the biggest difference, it's the most polluting lorries. So in doing an air quality plan, we need to fundamentally try and drop the level of heavy traffic going through, or let that heavy traffic move quicker by actually taking some cars off the road and improving rail services, hopefully getting the buses better so we have integrated fares. They're the things that actually declutter. And cycling routes are really important. because only a small number of people cycle, but the percentage of people cycling goes up the more the traffic is delayed. And the whole west of Nuneaton is cut off from cyclists by the appalling way of having to cycle up Tuttle Hill. I'm sure very few people here have cycled up Tuttle Hill. Going down is quite fun, but going up is not good. And there was a plan a decade ago to build a bridge over the Dingle and into the Camp Hill regeneration projects. That was cancelled because of funding constraints. You build a green cycling corridor and the youngest and the fittest will stop sitting in the cars and it'll make more room for everything else to flow. So a greening of Nuneaton and sorting out the air quality problems is led by actually, not by sticks, by stopping people driving, but by providing those really good bus services, cycle routes and train services to actually lead to a greener Nuneaton. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacore. Is there anything which officers wish to come back on? Okay, thank you. There are some points that I wish to pick up, given that transforming Nuneaton is actually my portfolio as business and regeneration. There are a number of, even though we aren't the county highways, I am aware that there are a number of schemes which are put forward as part of the Transforming Nuneaton agenda, which would be included within the Nuneaton Town Centre Transport Strategy. So that includes both the new transport hub, which is proposed by the railway, which we have now managed to be able to get onto the agenda of the railway authorities, which wasn't there before, and John McGuigan, I have to say, has done a lot of work in trying to get them on board with that. In addition, there are a number of junction improvements or road openings which are proposed, for example, opening up or reopening up Wheat Street, which I believe is one of the more is going to be coming forward quicker than some of the others. There's also the possibility of the Leicester Road Gyratory, where the current gym is. There's also the works up by the Dandelion Fountain and Queen's Road, and Coton Road is also under consideration on that front too. So there are a number of things being worked on in relation to transport. Whilst the Nuneaton Relief Road, or the Northern Relief Road that Councillor Watkins referred to, isn't strictly speaking within the ambit of this report, I can understand how he has managed to make a link. And let me say here and now, I would not support it on these grounds. Whilst it looks very attractive in principle that you'd be able to divert a lot of traffic from Tuttle Hill out across Weddington, the reality is, and this is one of the few instances I actually agree with Councillor Condacore, you would be talking a minimum of £100 million. Indeed, I understand the one which he refers to was a minimum of £50 million over in Rugby, which was a far smaller railway crossing than we would have to do with the West Coast Main Line. To achieve anywhere near that, you would have to have significant housing development in that neck of the woods to go over Weddington Fields. Indeed, not all of it is even within the Nuneaton Borough. A large part of it, according to the report that you have circulated, and I have read, Councillor Watkins, shows it is actually within North Warwickshire Borough to a significant extent. Even if you added up the 10,000 plus houses which we were forced to accept in Nuneaton alone under Labour's failing borough plan, it would come nowhere near the Section 106 requirements that would be necessary to make a Northern Relief Road viable or sustainable. The report also that you circulated, Councillor Watkins, says that the viability and deliverability, even if it is possible, is severely in doubt, which I could not countenance. And if the housing would end up falling in the North Warwickshire Borough, because there would only be a proportion within Nuneaton and Bedworth, it would be North Warwickshire Borough which got the benefits of council tax and all the other monies that would go with that. It is, to be quite honest, a pie-in-the-sky dream. And the opportunity to do or even consider that was when Labour put together the borough plan, because the Schlar actually had that parcel of land in there as a potential development site, and it was discounted because Labour decided to gerrymander the developments in Nuneaton and Bedworth. That is the reality, and it is too late now to come crying wanting a relief road which is pie in the sky and can't be delivered. So unless anyone else wishes to comment, I suggest that we take this to the vote. No? Okay, can all Cabinet members in favour please show? Okay, thank you very much. That has been approved. That takes us on to agenda item number 7, which is the establishment of a Cabinet Working Party on the Local Government Boundary Commission review on Borough Council ward boundaries. We have been informed by the Local Government Boundary Commission that we are significantly overdue a review. I think Brent and I have had the briefing at least twice now, if not 3 times, from the Boundary Commission. And the last time our boundaries were reviewed was in 1999. I think everyone would agree that the pattern of development and growth within Nuneaton and Bedworth has been substantial since 1999. Therefore, we are well overdue a boundary review. If you look at Appendix B, it quite helpfully shows a map of Nuneaton and Bedworth where the greatest variances of plus or minus 10%, because we're supposed to look at the average across Nuneaton and Bedworth for each ward. Weddington ward is, no surprise, 23% plus on the average, closely followed by St Nicholas ward 12%, and is likely to be significantly more by the time the pattern of development emerges and the houses are occupied. Whereas we have other wards, such as Bulkington ward and Bede ward and Kingswood ward, which are more than 10% under the average. We have essentially 2 options as a council. We can sit back and wait for the Boundary Commission to do its work without input from us as locals, those of us who actually know what it is like on the ground, or we can actually be an active participant. And it is my view as leader of the council and the view of the Conservative administration that we should be an active participant. The timeline is that we should decide by May next year how the council will be made up in terms of the number of wards and the pattern of elections, and then by 2023 we should then have decided the boundaries for the new wards, with a view to the boundaries being passed by Parliament in 2023 with elections in 2024. That means there is a significant amount of work to do, and I have to say officers have already been working on this, so we have to figure out what we expect our population to be approximately by 2028, which is plus 5 years from the date of the implementation of the new boundaries. And planning and election team are currently working on those figures, which will have to be agreed with the Boundary Commission. Therefore, to be an active participant, I believe we need to set up a Cabinet Working Party as set out in the agenda, and I will move the recommendations as printed. Does that receive a seconder? Okay, thank you very much. I have one speaker from the public, which is Mrs. Condacore.
Thank you. Well, I quite agree that the council should actually be actively, looking at this and not just relying on the Boundary Commission themselves. But just looking at these bits, that are in the agenda, the membership of the Working Party is not representative of the council as a whole. And objective 3B, to facilitate, coordinate, involve and consult borough councillors, well, you've excluded certain groups immediately, community organisations and any other relevant stakeholders in the review process to ensure effective consultation and participation in the council submissions to the Boundary Commission. Now, the 2 things do not tie up with who you're putting on the thing, on the working party, and information sharing, number 7, the working party will meet in private session. How is that consulting with all the community and all the councillors and involving the councillors? It's just not. It's nonsense. I understand you can't have a working party where the whole world can attend, but it should be that anyone who wants to see what's being discussed can see, and certainly any other councillors. And there are 3 groups on the council. You've got your ruling Conservative group, you've got your Labour group, and you've got the Independent and Green group. or Green and Independent, whatever the title officially is, you've not even got any representatives from all those groups. So it's not representative. So how are you going to give a good representation to the Boundary Commission when you're immediately excluding some of the councillors? Just doesn't make sense to me. Thank you.
I will respond to Mrs Condacall later. Any non-cabinet member wish to speak? Councillor Condacall.
Thank you, Chair. I would obviously just be totally agreeing with what my wife said and wanted to add a few more bits of nuance, because actually the boundary graph that shows where people are gaining and losing population shows what's going on in the borough. If you walk around Weddington and knock doors, you'll find that half the new houses are full of people moving into the borough, some from short areas, some from long areas, and the other half of the population moving into the new houses are actually quite local. They move from Stockingford or from Bedworth. Population moves around where there's good schools and various bits of infrastructure provided. And this is continuing, and we're actually depopulating effectively almost some wards. Very slightly as this population drift is happening. So I hope actually some of this will slow down. One of the absolute key things is good schools, and I know you share with me the disappointment that some of our schools have been underperforming over the years, particularly secondary schools. So I think raising the standard of schools will actually be a thing about population move. But we fundamentally need this boundary review to be fair on all parties. I took part in the boundary review at the County Council. The County Council is really good at involving every member of every party. The working groups are fully cross-party, and I do not understand why there is this cabinet working group rather than a working group with representatives, even if they're observers, from all the various parties in reasonable numbers. Because to actually have it 7-1 is effectively you working out what we're going to do and telling us afterwards. And the pressure is on the poor one councillor from the opposition groups is the one that you've decided should attend. That is not the way democracy should work. We should be doing it like the county council does it, and actually having an agreed, we might not like what happens in the carving things up and setting dates and numbers, but at least we're a part of the process. The way you're doing it, it leads to conflict, leads to people being shut out, and leads to anger. And it will in the end lead to the accusation, if what is produced doesn't look fair, that it's gerrymandering. I know the accusations been made of previous administrations. Having a large majority should actually mean you can actually decide what's going on, but you should do it with consent and in an even-handed way, because your supermajority does not last, and the more unfair you are in chivvying up the boundaries and setting the number of councillors and setting the date of elections, the more unfair and disenfranchised the population who doesn't vote Conservative will feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condacall. Myself, more than anyone else in this room, is acutely aware about the swings and peaks and troughs of electoral politics. Indeed, I took up leadership of the group when there were just 3 of us, and there are now 24. Although, coming to the point that Mrs Condacall made about including the Independent Green Alliance, the reality is 2 of that membership have defied the wishes of their electors. They were elected as Conservatives, and they should, if they had any honour and integrity, be sitting as either Conservatives or resign their seat and face a by-election to see whether the residents actually believe in that and their course of action. So the reality actually is that it is a minority party of the Greens who are very small in comparison to the number of votes received across the borough, but that does not prevent you from making your own representations to the Boundary Commission in due course, which I have no doubt that you both will do. The reality is that Bedworth needs to be represented, and there is Bedworth representation on there from councillors Evans and Brown. Last time I checked, there were 10 councillors in Bedworth, of which 9 are Conservative and only 1 is Labour. And last time I looked at the election results, there was only 1 Labour elected in the entire borough in 2021 and 1 Labour. If Councillor Watkins wishes to be on there as leader of the opposition, he is more than welcome, or if he wishes to delegate that to another of his number, then that is entirely his choice, and I would not object to you substituting any other member into there. But it is common practice within this authority that if the opposition group is to be invited, then it tends to be the leader of the opposition. If he doesn't wish to, then I'm sure we can amend that as necessary. But there is, as I said, only two options. We roll back and wait for it to be done to us, or we actually get on with the job and try and make a best representation for the benefits of our residents. Does any other member wish to speak? Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to very briefly pull up Councillor Conticore for something he said. He mentioned the word gerrymandering, and he knows, and I know that he knows, that this council does not have the power to set the new boundaries. We will simply make a representation to the Boundary Commission. So I did want to point that out before those accusations start getting hurled around, is that we were making a representation, and he is free to make his own representation. We will not be setting the boundaries. So before we start saying about gerrymandering, I think we have to be very, very careful with what we say. Thank you, Leader.
There is no such thing as a point of personal explanation for a non-cabinet speaker. With that being said, can we move to the vote? All those in favour of the recommendations? That is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 8. And this is Leisure Development Bedworth Physical Activity Hub update. Councillor Evans, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My last leisure strategy update to Cabinet was back in June, and members will recall my concerns over the financial viability of the adopted strategy. Unfortunately, despite previous assurances from the previous Labour administration that the Bedworth Physical Activity Hub in particular was near to construction stage, this was far from the truth, and the previous council failed to identify £500,000 to continue the project to Reba stages 4A and 4B, therefore leaving this new administration with a black hole of £500,000. Members will also recall that at the same meeting in June, I reported that the council had just submitted its ambitious application to the government's Levelling Up Fund for £15 million worth of funding. I am pleased to inform Cabinet that this application was approved during the budget that was announced by the Chancellor last month. This major investment for Bedworth acts as evidence that this council, working alongside the government, is determined to level up our borough and that we are committed to building back better for the borough after the pandemic. Following the government's commitment to back Bedworth to the tune of £15 million, I feel that we are now in a position as a council to move this project forward. However, I would like to point out that if it wasn't for some specific individuals, our application in reality would not have been the success it was. I'd therefore like to place on record, and I would like to request that the committee clerk minutes the following individuals. So I'd like to thank Director Kevin Hollis. I'd like to thank Katie from the Council Sports Development Team. I'd like to thank Rachel Fowler and her staff at Strategic Leisure Limited. I'd like to thank Coventry and Warwickshire Local Enterprise Partnership. And I'd also like to thank those MPs across the borough who have lobbied government ministers on our behalf. In terms of our current position, we are now at the ending stages of Reba Stage 3. And I would like to seek Cabinet's approval this evening to move the project forward to Reba Stages 4A and 4B by recommending to full council that we now include £500,000 in the capital programme to fund Reba Stages 4A and 4B. In addition, I would like to seek permission from Cabinet to give the Director for Public Services the delegated powers necessary to start the process of submitting a planning application. To give Cabinet a rough idea of what Reba Stages 4A and 4B will do, 4A is the continued development of the technical design, by the consultant team. This stage, this is the stage at which all the design information required to manufacture and construct the project will be completed. The architect will consult with the Borough Council's local building regulations officer and prepare the detailed design package showing how the roof, wall, floor and opening junctions will meet along with the specification and employer requirements, which will all be fully developed. At this stage, the planning will be submitted for scheme and the project will be issued to a chosen pool of contractors for tender. At REBA stage 4B, the expectation would be that once we have a main contractor on board, the design team will then be novated across to the contractor for them to produce the final construction drawings. Any pre-commencement planning conditions would also be discharged at this stage, ready for construction. In terms of the planning application itself, I have asked for the Director of Public Services to provide an interactive all-member briefing session on the designs. I have also asked that we include virtual voting on the designs to make sure all members feel they are properly included and feel part of the process. On the matter of the finances behind the project, I think we need to act as quickly as we can on this project due to supply chain issues, which means that in reality the cost of this project is likely to increase month by month. The overall cost of the project is forecasted to be at £27 million. 15 million of this is to be funded through our successful LUF bid. 10.5 million is to be funded through a mixture of prudential borrowing and Section 106 contributions. However, I would add that the payback on the prudential borrowing is likely to come back to the council very quickly, given that we won't be paying a £250,000 management fee to our operator, and we also hope to receive £1.5 million from Sports England. In conclusion, I would like to move recommendations 1 to 10 as printed on pages 1 and 2 of the addendum. Now is the time to move this project forward. We have to demonstrate to residents in Bedworth that we are determined to level up opportunities across the borough, and I believe that we can make this commitment tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Does that receive a seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Guttridge. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condical.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very exciting project, and unlike what Councillor Evans said, this is a project for Nuneaton and Bedworth, because we need a new leisure centre. The population's growing, and people from the two towns travel between the two towns quite easily. So it has always been a cross-party project, this, in terms of going to scrutiny. Every single councillor, every single scrutiny meeting supported rebuilding Bedworth. When I first started going out with Michelle 20 whatever years ago, we were swimming in that swimming pool when it was 20 odd years old. Yeah, it is a place that's used across the borough, and this is a really exciting project. And I do hope we won't get it as being this is the Conservatives project, because these projects last an awful long while, and it will be finished by the Conservatives, I hope, and I hope it'll be a massive success. And the officers and the Conservatives will be most praised if it's on time, on budget, and it all works. But this was started in scrutiny years ago. These things don't just appear on the first week of May 2021. A lot of work has been done by Kevin Hollis and his team over the years to look at the sports strategies, the Section 106 funding. This is a long-term thing, and so I hope this doesn't become partisan. I really do support this, because we do need people to be more active, and I'm really pleased that it's got the ambition to do green corridors linking in with the town centre, because at the moment you start to be separated. You've got the parking bit and you've got the town centre bit, so actually the more we do to make the two link together, the better. And I do hope that green corridor goes from Bedworth railway station as well, because that is where people coming to Bedworth for sporting event or to swim, whatever, will enter Bedworth. And I think you said before, we have these gateway surveys where people get off the train and what's your impression? So I hope the green corridor and the signposting and the pavement and structural improvements go from the railway station into this new exciting development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacore. Kevin, do you wish to comment on anything at this point? Okay, thank you. From my perspective, I would have to say, as the regeneration portfolio holder, I think this is a really exciting opportunity for Bedworth in particular, but Councillor Condacore is right in that it will have implications for Nuneaton too. Indeed, I remember spending many a summer holiday down there as a kid with the flume. I suppose that's an image that many of Cabinet can do without. But it is an opportunity to give future generations this game-changing opportunity to have something that many of us didn't have moving forwards. And indeed, we are already starting work on the green agenda. Kevin and I have a meeting next week, I think it is, to discuss how that can move forward into the town centre. And I really do hope that this is an opportunity to kickstart more activity in terms of regenerating Bedworth. If we can demonstrate that we now have Nuneaton on the go and Bedworth on the go, that we can get more people interested in regenerating and investing in Nuneaton and indeed in Bedworth. One of the first decisions I was tasked with when I first took up, well, even before I was officially voted in as leader of the council, was, are we going to submit a levelling up fund bid? My answer immediately was yes, number one, and two, it has to be for Bedworth, because we've started Nuneaton, we now have to start Bedworth. And I have to pay tribute, and I know he missed himself out on this, but Councillor Evans has worked tirelessly on this particular project. Indeed, I was having phone calls from him close to midnight on some instances, with emails in the wee small hours closely following up those chats. And he, together with his officers, worked very closely together to pull this over the line. And the fact that we did so is testament to the hard work and determination of everyone involved. And I would be so bold as to actually suggest that
Kyle's thanks to officers and others be included as an additional recommendation as 2.11 to ensure that, Kelly, if members of Cabinet are happy to accept that amendment. And I look forward to continuing the work, because we have an exciting opportunity if we get this right. Councillor Golby.
I would just like to follow on from what you've said. It should not be underestimated, the amount of work that has gone in to make this deliverable. And if the Luff bid hadn't have come through, the Bedworth Leisure Centre was in serious jeopardy. Indeed, it was not looking good at all. I think we've discussed that in open session anyway. So I'm not sure where Councillor Condacore is coming from, because I know that there has been an enormous amount of effort put in by the Conservatives on this and by the officers after we took over. So that in itself is indication of what we've had to deal with. So to try and make it into something that, oh, it's shared by everybody, it's been going on for years, I can guarantee you, had it been going on for years, we would have been at a more appropriate level than we walked into it at, and that Kyle has had to deal with. So I disagree with that sentiment entirely, for knowing the volume of work that's gone in to actually make this project viable and actually something that can be moved forward. Because despite what was put out in the election leaflets by the previous ruling group, there was no fully funding for this. That was fantasy, and regardless of what might have been said in a election leaflet, none of the staff managed to figure out where the rest of the money was coming from either. Hence the fact that we've had to do the Luff bid. And it's quite right that the Luff bid was put in the way it was put in and what it was put in for, because Bedworth has been neglected for a very long time. And that needs to be changed. And thank you very much for yourself, Kyle, and all the team that have done this. It really should not be underestimated, the amount of work that's gone into this.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Any other member? Councillor Croft and Councillor Evans.
Quickly, Chair, I don't know if you need a formal seconder for your vote of thanks, but if you do, I'm happy to do it. I'd just like to publicly express my appreciation to Councillor Evans. We're all very proud of him and the officer team. They've done an absolutely fantastic job. It is the job of the finance function to be the sceptic and to be the pessimist. And I'll tell you, I've never been so happy to be proven wrong. So thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I would remind Councillor Croft about the bet that we had as well, but I think he's forgotten about that. Just a few things to come back on. I agree with Councillor Kandaka. I very much hope that we as a Conservative administration do carry this project on and we see it out to the end, because we know what happened under previous administrations with Gresham Road and Civic Hall, etc. And our team is determined to deliver this on time and on budget. And whilst I'm pleased that Councillor Kandaka is here tonight supporting this, I would make the point that the government announced this funding several weeks ago, and whilst he's been on social media tweeting about sewage and flood ditches, not once has he mentioned that the government has backed this borough to the tune of £15 million. I think for a councillor, that's something you should come and stand out and welcome. But in terms of the Green Corridor, that is obviously part of the Luff bid. £2.3 million has been allocated within that for the Green Corridor, and I think that will also kick-start regeneration in Bedworth Town Centre. So I want to see that in place as quickly as possible. It will have benefits for Nuneaton, absolutely, of course. The council is still committed to reshaping the Pingles Leisure Centre, so that's going to be our next project when we get this out of the way. Yes, it's good to hear though that you're supportive of it, Councillor Kandaka. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. And just to follow up on something that Councillor Golby said, I well remember sitting here 2-3 months ago now when this was raised as an urgent item by Councillor Evans, to be told by the Leader of the Opposition, we knew where the £500,000 was going to come from, but we weren't going to tell you. Effectively, what this bid has done is hauled Labour's backside out the fire and saved this project for the people of Bedworth and beyond. And just to put this into context, if we had to borrow the full £27 million to generate this, we would have had to pay £300,000 a year in interest from the revenue budget. That is services provided directly by this council to every single taxpayer in this borough. That is the scale of the mountain that we had to climb in terms of getting this project over the line. It's not there yet, but we are now in with a fighting chance of getting there. So I'm more than happy to go along with the recommendations. All those in favour, with the addition, please show. Thank you very much. That is unanimous. So that moves us on to the enterprise strategy, which is page 76. That's Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. I'll try and be as brief as I can. I shall move item 9, which is our enterprise strategy, which is really speaking another weapon in our arsenal to save money, to make money, and to deliver services for this council. We originally called it the commercial strategy, but I think the steer that we gave as a political leadership was that we're prepared to go commercial if necessary, but it's not necessarily commercial, but we always want our officers to be enterprising. So what it allows us to do several things, this strategy, and it will form the basis of a culture shift. It will set out a framework for commercial income generation, which will really sort of help us in the longer term with the very serious budget challenges that the council faces. And at the same time, it brings in, or it will help to bring in, a lot of the best practice and efficiency from the private sector and improve our operations here at the Town Hall. Some of that best practice means being much more evidence-driven, being much more customer-focused,
and financially astute. We don't use data very well, for example, at the council. Local government in this country doesn't use data very well, and we need to get much better at that. And more, as well as that, it really does give officers the opportunity to be creative, to be enterprising, and to bring ideas to the table, where in previous years there might have been a culture of this is the way it's always been done, it has to stay like that. So it's a start for a real culture shift for the council, and it's going to allow us to pay our own way and provide the best possible services to the taxpayer long term, and actually start to replenish some of the money from the funding we've lost over the years. So I'm delighted to move it, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Croft, and I will second that. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you, Chair. I think enterprise strategy is quite a good name because it is, well, one the Starship Enterprise, isn't it? Sort of Trekkies will like it. But it does set that sort of boldy, challenging sort of idea. But one word that actually came up was data. And I think the council isn't going to be unique in thinking of ideas or looking at how it's doing. And there's a big trend towards open data. There's bits of it around, you know, the spreadsheets of council assets or whatever. But I think the council could do a lot more to open up data on its buildings, its energy, all sorts of bits of open data, which then might feed into people suggesting ideas. I remember a decade or so discovering the council had 2 abandoned shops with flats above on the top of the Queen's Road. And they've just been sitting there for years and years rotting. And I think this open data thing, where actually everyone knows all the council's assets and what they cost very much live, gives actually people the opportunity of saying, well, I could use that asset or that opportunity. So I think it is good. I also think there's lots of enterprise in energy now. We've got this massive need to generate renewable energy. We've got lots of buildings with roofs and things. And also, I mean, the new swimming pool, it will reduce energy consumption massively. And I think the more we can use data and look for entrepreneurs that want to set up and use facilities. Likewise, we've got spaces, you know, ice cream concessions, there must be lots of places where we can get enterprise into some of these leisure things. And so the more the data, the more information shared, and you don't have to wait for some obscure council tender for the ice cream concession for a park, I think it'd be useful. So I'd really sort of plug out open data as part of this going to enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Anyone else? No? Well, Councillor Condacourt did refer to the Starship Enterprise, and as a avid Trekkie myself, and I think Brent and I have had these discussions, we did have to resist the urge to put William Shatner in the introduction. But this is an ideal opportunity to actually allow officers to do something different and come forward with ideas which can actually make a difference to Nuneaton and Bedworth. Indeed, in the formulation of this policy, I'm aware that there have been 3 suggestions come in before it has even been implemented. And I very much welcome those being investigated to the full, robustly challenged and checked, and brought forward as innovative ideas to actually bring in further income generation. We have to bear in mind that this is a culture change for a lot of officers, that under the previous administration there wasn't the freedom to think. We have gone away and actively told our officers to go away and think and come up with ideas, and we will judge what is the best option for Nuneaton and Bedworth. And I really look forward to seeing what future ideas come forward, because not only could it generate income, but it could, in some situations, change lives and transform our towns as well. Brent, do you have anything you wish to comment on? No. Any other member? No. In which case we can move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That has been carried. So that moves us on to agenda item number... Just try and find my page. Agenda item number 10, which is the procurement of gas. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. This is a very short one. This effectively renews the purchasing agreement we have with the regional consortium for our gas supplies until 2027. It's gone through the proper tender process and the procurement process. Cabinet just needs to approve it. And the real advantage it gives us is it gives us certainty of price every year for budgeting, which is going to be a huge help for us, especially after what's just happened in the energy market. So let's grab it with both hands before it gets away. Thank you. I'll move that, Leader.
Okay, and I'm happy to second that from the Chair. Any non-Cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I'd have liked to have seen is a little table of our biggest 2 or 3 gas consumption things in the borough, because £309,000 is a lot of money, and I hope the new leisure centre will be ground source heat pumps and all electric and no gas at all. But I do think it is useful to know where we're going with gas and what our building use is. And also, could Councillor Croft tell us how much the uplift would be? Are we going to be paying 50% more on this new contract? Because I know wholesale prices have gone through the roof. So it would be useful to indicate if that, obviously I'm not expecting exact numbers, but yeah, if the budget's 209,000, where around are we going to be for gas costs going forward? Thank you, Chair.
Brent is poised on that one. I think he might know that one.
Thank you, Chair. The answer is I don't know that, and that is because the procurement model is based on forward purchase. So at the present, the gas will be purchased on a forward basis, which is why we have certainty of price for any financial year. So it's when that starts to come into place, then we'll have an idea about what those prices are. But at the present time, we have forward purchase for a number of months, so we won't need to forward purchase until hopefully there has been some sort of rectification of the quite extraordinary gas prices at the moment. But that is one of the key things with going with the ESPO deal. It's forward purchase in small chunks, which spreads out risk, but also gives certainty from a budgeting perspective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brent. No? Okay. Any Cabinet member wish to speak? No? Okay. Can we move to the vote then? All those in favour of the recommendations? That is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 11, which is Building a Better Borough, a refresh of the corporate plan. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. This is on the agenda in my name, and I move it as such, but I know it's your baby, so I shall not speak great length on this. I do need to amend it slightly on page 102 to add a 2.3 to the recommendation that the chairman of the 3 overview and scrutiny panels be requested to hold a joint meeting to review the document and feedback, because rather than holding 3 separate meetings on the same thing. This is a very major document in the life of this administration because it starts to turn our political objectives into governance. It replaces the previous delivering our future plan, which wasn't particularly satisfactory from our perspective. It wasn't hugely coherent in terms of the way we approach the world. And what this really does is it clearly denotes a policy agenda. It breaks things down into very clearly defined policy themes around that great slogan of making the borough the place to live and to work and to visit. And that's really what we are all about, trying to restore civic pride, regenerate the place and make the place a real home for us all. So that is the idea behind the strategy, and this is to take it out to consultation before the final approval, and that's what I'm going to move, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. I'll come in later, but I am happy to second the proposal. As you have indicated, it is something I have been working on quite diligently and intrigued by. Any non... Oh, sorry, Mrs Condacourt, you wish to speak. My apologies.
Thank you. The one thing that leapt out at me was actually how little reference there was to climate change, which I think is actually the biggest issue of our time. And it was way, way down before I found anything about it. I was also concerned with this phrase, which just seemed so marketing-y and not actually very meaningful. Sponsor a sustainable green approach. I presume you just mean support a sustainable green approach, because Sponsor, I mean, that immediately brings up money, and I know there's very little money floating around and things. So I'd like a little bit of clarity on that. Yeah, that was the main things I wanted to say. And there was no mention of how you're going to consult with the public, so I'm not sure whether that's just going to be an online consultation or what. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Condacourt. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you very much. So it's me again. A few things are really important when trying to improve our borough. I think one of the really big challenges is the health inequality, part of which is down to our industrial past, all sorts of things like that, but part of it is the environment. So I do hope a lot of the well-being and health thing is about providing not just what's legally required. I mean, if you take air quality, 40 is the legal limit, but actually what is best for our population. And as best for our population as low as possible. And for all sorts of issues, I hope this is aspirational, not just doing the legal minimum. And for things like tree planting and generally the things that actually make us mentally better, I think we need to actually have bigger open public spaces, more trees, and actually embed it in some of our planning, particularly town centre planning. You look at a walk around Warwick compared to a walk around Nuneaton. We're at the time now we're rebuilding our town centre, so now is the time to put well-being as a high priority. So if you could say, well, could we do have a bit more concrete here, a bit more, actually think about the environment people are living. And we have a massive health emergency, and we have a climate change emergency. And most of the solutions to one actually then help the other as well. So I really do hope this goes well. I'll look forward to the joint OSC meetings and really try and stimulate a change in Nuneaton and Bedworth, and obviously green corridors. We're starting to use the right words, but actually we need to start to embed that in the designs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacourt. This is designed to replace the Delivering Our Future, which has 3 strands of transformation, collaboration and investment, which was put forward by the previous administration. Those phrases, delivering our future, transformation, collaboration and investment, sound rather Orwellian to me and don't actually mean a lot. What we have aimed to do with this new corporate plan is the Ronseal plan, which is it does what it says on the tin. This is about building a better borough. And whilst you might not necessarily be able to visualise how this is intended to come out because this is just in plain word format, the idea behind this is that this is like a house that you have at the top, the ultimate aim, which is Nuneaton and Bedworth 2032, working in partnership, restoring pride in our borough. And that we have the pillars which underline and support that, which are live, work and visit. And the foundations for that are that we must be imaginative, enterprising, but yes, transparent in how we operate as a council. That is the fundamental basis for how we are moving forward in
this. And then the plan is designed, if you look over onto pages 104 to 106, is that each of the strands actually have some supporting aims that go with it, where we start to put more meat on the bones of this plan. So to take Mrs. Condacourt's immediate point about sponsor a sustainable green approach, it quite clearly says at page 104, the climate change emergency cannot be ignored. We will proactively identify ways in which the council and the borough as a whole can minimise our impact upon the environment, supporting residents and businesses alike. Now that isn't just about doing the environmental things, reducing our carbon emissions, etc. It is also about future planning. So one of the things that the Cabinet Working Party, which has worked on this alongside officers, and I have to say we were praised very strongly by the Local Government Association peer review, is that a lot more of this can be done through, for example, our planning processes. So Phil Richardson, I would be looking towards, and Councillor Smith, for how can we actually make our future housing more cost effective for the residents in terms of heating, lighting, plumbing, and all that jazz, but also how it then has the effect of reducing carbon emissions and making our environment a better place to live, work, and visit. Those are the key underlying principles behind that. And we will be going out to consultation. I'm sure Brent will be sorting out the methods of consultation with the public. But also, and I know Councillor Condacor raised this at the finance, it was Business and Regeneration Overview and Scrutiny Panel. You raised this as an item on the forward plan. I had this put on the forward plan, so it was as no surprise to anyone else. And I gave you an undertaking, Councillor Condacor, that I wanted to bring this to the Overview and Scrutiny Panels, and that I would be more than happy to come forward and lead on these issues and take questions and listen to people. I hope you will see that as an example of how this administration is doing things differently, and that I want to come forward, engage with scrutiny, place the right value on scrutiny, and take that forward. And I think, as well, officers have really taken to this. I know that all portfolio holders, when they have spoken to their directors, the phrase "the BAB" is going around all of them and talking already about work they are doing towards the BAB. And officers recently had a senior officer away day, did you not, Brent, where these strands were discussed, and you are looking at how we can put that together in an action plan, both for the short and the longer term. Yep. And I look forward to seeing that plan develop. But before we can progress with that plan, we need to consult on the foundations which are within this document. So I really look forward to taking this on and seeing it grow and show the future direction of this new Conservative administration. Any member wish to speak? No? All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Thank you very much. And I look forward to appearing before scrutiny in due course. That then takes us on to agenda item number 12, which is the quarterly performance reports. That's you, Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. Me again. I shall move the recommendation at item 12. It's the usual report we get. There are some things to highlight. I highlight some of the positive things first because I don't like to be too pessimistic. Accounts payable continues to be absolutely brilliant. We really ought to highlight that. Things like risk monitoring, benefit processing are going in the right direction. The main issue I would like to highlight to the Cabinet, which is of concern to the administration, is the overspend in the general fund for this year. We are just over £500,000 adrift from where we should be according to the budget. Some of that can be put down to COVID spend pressures, increased bank charges, increased agency staff via the pandemic, the ongoing commercial property voids. But what is quite concerning is that we have a number of underspends simultaneously. We're getting income from the Civic Hall, and we're underspending there because we're renting out the NHS. We haven't filled a lot of vacancies, and we're going to work on a lot of the HR issues identified by the report starting tomorrow night. So what I would flag to Cabinet is that the 508,000 that we are overspent is net against the budget for this year. Now, we are working on the strategy to bring this back into balance, and we're bringing the budget report to the next Cabinet. But I do want to highlight that the financial situation for the Council is very challenging still, in spite of the fantastic news about the leisure centre in Bedworth. It could have been considerably more challenging still, and that is for this financial year, and that is the continuing COVID situation and the continuing inheritance of the budget situation that we found. And we will balance the books. We will balance the books for this year, and we will fill the £1.5 million deficit that we need to balance the books next year. We are required to do so by law, and otherwise, well, we're a banana republic, aren't we? And we're not going to do that, but it's going to be very challenging, and those who willfully call for extra public spending, I would encourage restraint. So thank you, Leader. I shall move the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft, and I'll second that from the Chair. Mrs Condacor, you wish to speak on this item?
Thank you. Well, some of the bits I was going to mention, Councillor Croft, sorry, your name went for a moment, has actually already raised and things. A few bits that I was sort of a bit curious about, really. It says on page 114, the first bit, on the positives, a further 64,000 underspent has been identified within the grounds maintenance service, as the budget has been incorrectly overstated and will not be required. I'm just concerned because I often end up answering the phone if Keith's out, and residents are always complaining about grounds maintenance and what have you in the council, run properties and things like the chines and things. So I'm just concerned that the grounds maintenance is actually being done there. Further down on that page, it's down as a positive in that we've got 40.81% percentage of waste recycled and composted against the 35% profile target. I've got to say that the profile target is absolutely pathetic, and we really need to be getting much better. So although you've got that down as a positive, just seeing that figure there of 40%, I feel is rather pathetic and not very ambitious and needs to be much better. Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned it before, and you've obviously you're aware of it and things. The vacancy savings from having various positions not filled, it really does seem to be sort of something that needs to be really tackled head on, because the agency staff spend to cover some of these things is really quite monstrous. So I rather feel that probably if you actually paid people a little bit more, you'd actually get better recruitment for these jobs, and then you wouldn't have to be spending it on agency staff. Yeah, on page 122, the third bit, data collection has commenced. However, due to the inability to recruit, production of the monitoring report is behind schedule. So there are a lot of things where we're really not doing what we should be doing as a council, because we just haven't got the staff, and that, really is a issue as far as I'm concerned. And can someone just tell me on page 126 on the actions comments, what does FSE stand for? I've raised it umpteen times at different cabinets over the years about not having acronyms without having a glossary of telling us what they stand for, and it still happens, and I don't know what that stands for. Can someone tell me, please?
What I will ask is that we undertake, because I'm sure that we have your email on file somewhere, Mrs. Condacor. If someone can undertake to reply to Mrs. Condacor about what that is, I think it's a very valid point about what that means, so we'll take that one forward. Kelly, if you can also make a note of that. Thank you. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacor, would you yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to come back on that point about grounds maintenance, because residents at places like Carisbrook, etc., are actually starting to pay people to mow the lawns outside their flats. A lot of them, particularly on the ground floor, are disabled, and because of the fire doors being quite heavy, they're quite dependent upon their patio doors, and they're actually now paying people to mow the grass. They're paying to get mowed through their service charges. And so some of this underspend that's going on isn't actually just saving money, it's actually not providing services that the residents are paying for through service charges. And I think the residents are owed a refund. And so to actually look at some of this as being, oh, we've not got we've got £64,000 here spare, and I think it was £180,000 last year's accounts underspend on ground maintenance for our housing stock. Yeah, this is not giving us savings. This is actually not doing the stuff the tenants are paying for. And I think the tenants should be given a refund for some of the money that hasn't been spent on mowing the lawns at the Chimes, Reg Haddon Court, Carisbrook, Cleaver Gardens, and all the other council housing places we've got around this borough, because this underspend is us not doing work, and this is something that we do need to sort out. And I keep trying to get the officers to have a walk around some of my housing estates at the moment to look at the work that's delayed. And I'm sure Councillor Guttridge would moan if I copied and tagged all the residents as a new service request. Whatever I do seems to not be happy with Councillor Guttridge in terms of bringing grounds maintenance issues up. But this underspend is work not being done that needs to be done, or money needs to be paid back to the tenants. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condicle. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. You might be able to answer these now, Councillor Croft. If not, just email me, it's not a problem. Page 114. The Green Homes Phase 1 project underspend of 211,000. As the scheme was drawn to a close, and this unused grant will be repaid to back to the government. Can you tell me, can you confirm a little bit about that? Like I say, you don't have to answer me now, you can answer it in an email. And just the other clarification I'd like to give me is on page, so I can put my glasses back on now, I'm not on 124. Complete all agreements for the community management of the pavilions in Borgington, Weddington and Galley Common. Can you confirm which one you mean in Galley Common, please? The pavilion. You could have got that mixed up with Kingswood, I think. But if you just clarify them two for me, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Before we move on, Brent's had an epiphany as to what this FSE actually stands for. So save us having to email you, Brent.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So it should actually be FSB, not FSE, and that's the Federation of Small Businesses. But I'd absolutely take Mrs. Condicle's point that we should be pointing out in full words what it is. So we'll do that. Yeah, so it should be B and not E.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Councillor Croft, then Councillor Golby.
Very quickly, I will come back to him on the pavilion because I think he might be right, but you know what it's like, the residents of that village think that that part of the world is part of Galicom, and Councillor Golby can answer him on green homes.
Councillor Golby.
Thanks, Chair. The green homes, yeah, there's money going back, but it was actually given out to people to spend in the form of grants, and unfortunately, because the grants weren't spent by the people who received them, they had to give them back. So it went out of the council, and it's had to come back into the council. But we are covering those grants again on the second round, so no one's going to be out of pocket. It was not our control, so it's not like the money's been sat in the bank and no one's touched it. It went out the door. We've had to get it back in because those are the conditions applied to the grant. If it wasn't spent by the recipient by X date, it was null and void. So that's why that happened. The grounds maintenance, I know about grounds maintenance. There are resolutions in place that will be coming to a future meeting, shall we say. So everything is already under control in that respect to provide a resolution. But I would also like to say that if people are experiencing issues with grounds maintenance, that they should be logging it through customer services, and I will actually be asking my team to review the calls that have come in through customer services regarding people having to cut their own grass, etc., etc. And I'll be asking for a report on that. So I do hope people have been logging it through the appropriate channels, because we've been pushing for that for quite some time, so we can measure what's going on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. I know that it's been a work in progress on that one. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Just further to what Councillor Golby has said about the Green Homes grant, I would say this is not an issue that is specific to
Nuneaton and Bedworth, it is actually a problem that's been in the West Midlands, and the reason for that is that the registered suppliers through the scheme, there's been next to none in the Midlands, and I know of people through work elsewhere in the Midlands who have had to use suppliers as far as Portsmouth, and a lot of people have not been able to claim the grant for that reason. So I don't think it is a problem for the council. But
Councillor Guttridge.
Can I just follow on from Councillor Golby? Can you please use the customer services? Log it on customer services. You get a customer service number, which is then traceable. Then they pass it through to the relevant departments, and then you get a call back or an email back, and they tell you what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. And indeed, for councillors, we've all had an email today, I believe it is, about the new system, which we have been working on, and Councillor Croft has been pushing with Tom Shardlow for want of a better phrase, a members caseworker system, so that when we do have issues such as grounds maintenance, if it is a member who is reporting it, it is flagged up as a members inquiry, and we can then trace that, not just on grounds maintenance but on other issues too. And we are scheduled to have some kind of training on that according to the email, which we all need to sign up to. And I would encourage all members to do that, and I know I need to sign up to it as well. I haven't had a chance yet, but I will be doing so. Just to answer a few of some of the points which were raised about agency spend and vacancies, indeed that is something that at Leadership Board we have been discussing, and Brent will be undertaking a piece of work with his officers about what the actual net spend is in terms of agency staff. So there might be savings identified through some vacancies, but we are then spending out through agency staff. What is the actual net cost of going with agency? Is it actually being counteracted by what the actual saving would be? So we are trying to look into that. In terms of some of the living complexes, in addition to the work that Councillor Golby is doing, I am aware that there has been an issue with, shall we say, some rogue parking around some complexes. So people have been actually blocking access to some complexes at the time that grounds maintenance is due to go. Quite often they're things like white vans, etc. In the way. We have asked, and I'm sure Kevin's been taking this forward as well, that Glendale actually try and take a picture of these so that we can actually prove this is what is happening, and that we can try and work with the local complex managers to actually try and resolve these issues. I do accept there is a point about some residents having access, but if we can't actually get Glendale physically in, then of course the grass isn't going to be cut, the bushes maintained, etc. And in terms of compost and recycling, I suspect that Labour's green bin tax may have something to do with that, particular bugbear. And despite the lies on the current Labour literature for the by-election saying that we pledged to abolish it in this manifesto, I challenge anyone to read the manifesto where it actually says that. If we are ever in a financial position to reduce it, we will do so, because I believe that would have a beneficial impact on the composting and recycling. But the reality is the financial state of affairs we've been left with by the previous administration means that we cannot afford to do so. But it is, and I say this quite clearly, it is a Labour lie that we put that in the manifesto. Go read it, it's still online. But if we can, we will reduce it, and in fact, I have given a commitment that it will not go up in this budget, and I can say that quite loud and proud, that it will not be going up in this budget. But we have other things to look at where there are significant spend pressures, and I know that Councillor Evans is looking at some of those in relation to something like the Civic Hall, which costs us £800,000 a year after we receive any income in a normal year. And that is an area of concern where we need to try and make the Civic Hall more viable in the long term. But if harder decisions had been made before, I suspect we wouldn't have been in this position at all. Councillor Evans, you're indicating.
One point I promise, Chair. You've raised about the green waste collection charge, and there's a reason why local authorities are not changing their current charges, and that is because the government is currently going through a waste consultation with local authorities, and there is a possibility that at some point there might be new legislation coming forward that makes it law for councils to provide green waste collections for free. So it would be fairly irresponsible of us to change our operation on that if in 12 months down the line we've got to completely change it all over again. So I am aware of the allegations made by Councillor Watkins' side of the chamber, but we're going to make the responsible decisions, and if they want to play politics on this matter, then they need to present a shadow budget in February to demonstrate that.
Thank you, Councillor Evans, and I think it's worth remembering and reminding ourselves as a cabinet that we didn't go into the 2018 election promising not to increase or actually implement green bin charges, then literally 2 months after they were elected actually reversed on their manifesto pledge and implemented a green bin charge. So we have the recommendations to note the report. Is everyone happy to accept the recommendation? Please show. Okay, thank you very much. So that moves us on to the addendum, which is the Local Government Association Corporate Peer Review. And this is in my name. I do apologise for it only coming out yesterday, I believe it was, but we only had the final version late last week, and we have been working on the action plan, which you will see in the papers. One of the first things that I asked for as the new leader of the council was for us to have an independent corporate peer review of the council, because, surprise, surprise, the previous administration, in all of its years in control, never actually had one, and it didn't want one because it didn't want to actually be challenged. But as a new administration, we welcome that challenge so that we can actually identify, yes, where there are areas of good practice, but also areas where we need to improve. And I think it is safe to say that this report has done exactly that. It has identified areas of tremendous work that this council is doing and continues to do. But there are areas for improvement. So they spoke to over, in the course of 2.5 days, they spoke to, I think it was close to 80 odd people, include not just senior councillors and senior officers, but our external stakeholders too. And I'm pleased to say that one of the things that the reviewers were actually really quite happy to tell Brent and I in our daily updates was that they really value the input and conversations we have externally. But one of the challenges, and it comes out in the report and the recommendations, is we do not do enough communication in the right way with people, both in terms of selling our good news, but also in terms of managing expectations. So, for example, Councillor Gutteridge did that wonderful video about the bush trimming this September, hedge cutting, to actually show that we cut 20 miles of hedges, I believe it was, and that we were actually doing a harder cut so that A, we could get into the grass underneath, but also to make it more sustainable for maintenance in the long term. And that is exactly good practice which we need to maintain and develop moving forwards. An item which has been raised is about data, and I would agree that we are not as good at using data as we should be to make sure that we drive our decisions in the right way. But this new administration has been hot on the issue with officers of making sure that when we are presented with reports and options, that we are given the full range of facts so that we can make an informed decision, and that there is evidence behind that. And I think one of the best examples, the shining example of that, in fact, and that new approach, is the work that Kevin and his team did in terms of the Lough bid. So showing all the impacts and benefits that the new Bedworth Leisure Centre / physical activity hub, which we're going to have to get used to saying, will have, and the current state of play within the borough and the potential that is there as well. And I think that that is highlighted quite well. In terms of other recommendations that were made, I'm pleased to say that they were very pleased with how Cabinet, the new Cabinet, have gelled and formed and are working with officers, and that we have a very good working relationship with officers and hit the ground running, and that we are not afraid to check and challenge each other, both Cabinet member to officer and officer to Cabinet member, and I think that is a valued and valuable way moving forwards. And I'm sure we have robust discussions, but we make sure that we do so respectfully and with the right ideas in mind. One thing which we were aware of is that we don't have a medium-term financial plan in any meaningful sense of the phrase, and that is something which we are lacking moving forwards, and we need to do that, but also find ways of adopting more enterprising strategies. So we've already started addressing that tonight with the enterprise strategy. They've recommended about the corporate plan and actually the vision that this new administration has for council services moving forwards. And again, we've already made significant headroads into doing that. Staff recruitment and retention is something we were acutely aware of when coming in, and Councillor Croft and Brent and the HR team are working on that, and indeed we have the employment committee tomorrow where we are looking at how we can address some of these issues for the long term. We do need to complete some more key strategic policy documents, in particular a people strategy, town centre strategy and capital asset management. And one thing which we banged on about in opposition, we are keen to see, is that key large-scale projects moving forwards are managed appropriately, robustly, and are challenged to make sure that we are maximising our opportunities, sticking to budget, sticking to time, and that we don't end up in situations we've had before, which I know Councillor Guttridge is very keen on. And so we do need to look at our project management methodology, and that is something which is on there. And considering the effective use of data, we've already done. A resident survey, that is something that we haven't done for a significant amount of time. And I think if we are looking at council services and how we want to shape them moving forwards, the best way to do so is actually to ask the residents what they value and what they want from a council. Now, we may not always be able to match reality with request, but at least we can ask the questions so that we can try and formulate the answers. And looking at communications, it's not just in terms of talking to residents, although that is vitally important, but it's also about communication within Cabinet and senior management, and also about communicating with staff. And one of the things I'm most pleased about is that just for sitting there for 10 minutes every 3 months, typing out a update from the leader to members of staff, which they never had before, staff are actually feeling valued and updated by the new administration. And I've had feedback from officers yesterday, in fact, about that, and that is pleasing to see. And again, the corporate identity refresh, we actually need to have, if we are going to go out there and sell the borough, to try and get the regeneration in and the investment we need to actually have a strong brand as Nuneaton and Bedworth for them to buy into. So a lot of hard work already done in the past 5 months, a lot of hard work to do, and they will be revisiting us in March, I think it is, to see how we have done. But I see the LGA as a key stakeholder and partner in the work that we are doing, not as something to be shunned as under the previous administration. I think that was a very valuable 2.5, 3 days worth of work. Just on that, there was a lot of work that went into it before as well. Does it receive a seconder? Councillor Golby. Thank you very much. I didn't see anything on public speaking from you, Mrs. Conacher, but did you wish to anyway? Because I know it was a late agenda item. So, any non-cabinet member, Councillor Conacher.
Thank you, Chair. This is the second peer review I've taken part in, because we had one at the County Council. and they are really useful exercises. So I must congratulate you for taking part and organising it. But also, there's what's written between the lines as well, because this isn't quite a warts and all report. It obviously focuses and is there to encourage the council. And obviously, there are lots of risks. It's interesting to read the things we need to do, particularly things like medium-term financial plan, the capacity problems the council has. You know, we want to do all these things, and yet we've only got so many officers. So I think it's useful, but I think it's important to read it in a way that you actually focus on where it's giving you a message. And I think it's very valuable for that. And it's interesting in the recommendations, particularly number 1, about capitalising on the positive progress made with cabinet member and senior management relationships and things. Because I think a lot of that relationship building and actually getting trust and things, it's making the thing work better. I think the county council works very well in many aspects. Some things it doesn't. And I think it's a positive step to have this review where you go through. But I do think we need to solve the areas where there's still some toxic aspects to relationships in the council. And if you go to standards hearings, you see a lot of complaints going through, which obviously we can't talk about in detail. But I think we need to get to a situation where they don't exist, not because we're not considering them, but actually we start to think of why did they happen, and actually try and get the culture of the council better in all aspects, and actually have people treated with respect. And I think it's something you do generally want to do, so I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But I do want to emphasise we shouldn't be spending money on investigations and things, and the improved relationships that are happening now in lots of aspects need to actually be throughout the council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any member? Councillor Golby.
I'll stand up for this one. I don't think it will escape anybody's notice that on page 10, it does talk about the upcoming financial pressures, which are £1.5 million of savings to be made in 22-23, and £2.2 million worth of savings to be made the next term after. That is going to be difficult. We are going to need to make some difficult decisions, it's been said. But not only are we looking at savings, we have actually challenged our officers to look at revenue generation as well. So this should not be just read as we're going to cut everything, cut. We're actually looking at how to increase our revenues so it's not as bad as it seems on the paper. So I just want to kind of get that out there. But I do want to point out some really positive things. So on the same page, it says the council has a very committed workforce. Staff we met talked with pride about the borough and the ambition this council has for the place. And yeah, we do realise we have got a committed workforce. We value our workforce. We couldn't have achieved some of the things that we've achieved so far without the commitment from our teams. And I've said before, I really appreciate my teams. They do work really hard and they do go over and above. And I'm sure everybody else who has a leadership role can say the same thing about their teams too. So that is not to be underestimated. That is what is making the council work really well. And we can deliver what we've promised to deliver because there are lots of people working in the background to make that happen. There's various things that I'd like to point out, which, for example, on page 17, it says there are some significant challenges across the borough and the level of ambition this council has is to be applauded. Well, it's great to actually note for people to notice that we do have ambition. We have been shouting about this for years from that side of the chamber. And this should have been done years ago, and it wasn't. You have to turn over a few stones. You cannot address problems if you don't actually query what the problems are. And we went into this quite openly, knowing that we needed to have somebody come in and tell us where the problems were and give us an idea of an alternative perspective, a fresh pair of eyes. So it's good that actually we've not shied away from our responsibilities since taking over in May. We've achieved a lot. And it does say there is clear focus on delivery by the new administration, and the political and managerial leadership are committed to deliver change. I don't think anybody should be under any doubt that we are looking to deliver change. And particularly in my remit, example of close and collaborative workings were outlined by the police. I've made it a point of mine to meet with the police every month for a chat and a catch-up, just to know what's going on. Apparently that didn't happen before. So I meet with the leaders in the Justice Centre, and we have an open dialogue. He's got my number, I've got his number, and if there's anything going on, pick up the phone. And that is how we are working now. I don't believe that actually happened before. And I'd just like to move on to the HRA, which is also my area of responsibility. And just to point out that it does say in here there's an annual turnover of £26 million and approximately 5,800 dwellings. That is an awful lot to manage. And the team do a great job. I will never underestimate the amount of work that my team put in. We had an issue close to the town centre a couple of months ago where there was a fire, and it was noted that the police were on site and the fire was on site, but the council were on site as well. They got out of their houses, everybody was safe, but the council team was there as well. So it's to acknowledge that they do actually do things like that. And I do agree with what Councillor Kandaka has said, funnily enough, about toxicity, etc., etc. But if you stopped calling us Nazis on Twitter, that might help.
Thank you, Councillor Dolby. Any other member? Councillor Guthridge.
Thank you, Leader. I'll just tell you about the Parks team. We had a meeting in the Chamber last week. I invited all the Parks team who are employed by Nuneaton and Bedworth Council. I even invited the director. He declined because he was at another meeting. But we sat here in the Chamber, playground fitters, the countryside officers, the contract officers, and we sat and we talked through what we are going to do for the next 3 to 4 months. And I found it a very interesting meeting. We had a cup of tea, I brought some biscuits in, and we know what we're doing. And they're all on board with us. It's called building the bridges and making them feel welcome. We've got some good officers here, good staff who go beyond the call of duty. I've got 2 playground fitters. They go beyond the call of duty. They'll do things. They'll be out at night, early mornings. I can't fault the 2 lads. I'm very lucky to have the staff I've got on the park team. We have made mistakes in the summer due to the weather, because it's a weather-resistant portfolio holder. Grass does grow, trees do grow, but we are getting on top of the job. They've never had a meeting before where we've sat and discussed what we're going to do in the next few months. They've just been badgered all the time. I sat there and I was open and honest and told them what we wanted to do, and I can't fault the staff I've got.
Thank you, Councillor Guthridge, for fear of reopening the old Biscuit Gate debacle that happened. I think it just goes to show to the testimony that this administration is actually working really hard we hit the ground running. We had fresh ideas and fresh blood, and officers have been extremely receptive to new ways of working and a new approach and attitude, and I think that bodes well for the future. There's work to be done, but I have no doubt that between us as a new administration, new cabinet and a management team that we are up to the challenge, and I look forward to seeing a progress report on what happens after March, so if we can make sure that comes back to cabinet post-March once we've had the team back. But the recommendations are there that we accept the report and the action plan. All those please show. Okay, that's unanimous again. Thank you very much. That is the end of the agenda. I have not been notified of any other items and no recommendations from overview and scrutiny. So please have a safe journey home, and thank you very much for your attendance.